This is an Audio Wool original.
So the other day, we did something we've been wanting to do since we started this show. By the way, this is Byron. Welcome to Frightday. A really special opportunity. So important that I actually relocated most of my studio here and set up on the porch of Kelly and Sam's house. This was the first time since early March, when the COVID-19 situation started getting bad, that we've recorded in the same place. But what would be enough to pull us out of our boarded-up quarantine shelters? That would be the wonderful Laura Eisenhower. Laura is a global alchemist, researcher, and medical and intuitive astrologist with a vast knowledge in the alien agenda, hidden and galactic history, exploded planets, earth grids, time travel, chemtrails, the Illuminati, and so much more. She also just so happens to be the great-granddaughter of the 34th President of the United States of America, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who of course has his own history with extraterrestrials. Obviously, we didn't hit on everything in her expertise. We focused mostly on her being a whistleblower, recruited by the government to colonize on Mars, as well as the moon and its place in astrology. She's a fountain of knowledge, and we really appreciate her time. I can't wait to do it again. But enjoy our first conversation with Laura Eisenhower. And special guest, the gentle hiss of Montana rain.
If you're comfortable, give us some early life bio. How did you come into this? Did members of your family discuss any of this with you? And give us your early years.
I was in my own world. I mean, I was like a super weird kid. You could call me a black sheep. I don't know what you would call me, but I was experiencing things that I tried to communicate with my family. And at times, they were receptive. At other times it was like, okay, it's a little weird. And then it got a little bit too weird, because I was getting a lot of downloads, and I could safely say that started around the age of like 5 or 6.
Oh my gosh.
And I have distinct memories, and I've written it in books that I'm still waiting to publish, of like real downloads and almost like I was being prepared for something. And I never met Eisenhower in the physical, but I was next to Mamie on her deathbed as a little kid. But there was his presence that I always noticed, and I thought it was really weird. I'm like, okay. I'm not, trying to smear or blame any family members, but I was like considered sort of the kid with ADD, the kid that can't get good grades or this or that. But there'd be certain things that I would thrive in and do really well in. So they knew that, but I noticed like, why am I needing to define myself based on what others think of me? And I'm like, everybody does that. What's wrong with this dimension? Right. What's wrong with this world? Like, it's almost like I could notice like the programmings But I made a lot of really good friends along the way too. It really depended on where I was. And so I had moved to England when I was 12 years old, and that was a really great experience. Because after we moved to DC, there was so much of like the politicians' children that was really hard to relate to. And I never really was like, oh, I'm related to Eisenhower, like at all. So they didn't really know, but they were all like, I am a congressman's daughter or son. And they're, and it's just like so much like weird ego. But at the same time, they were very advanced beings in a lot of ways, like great artists and athletes and this and that. We had family members like my siblings, but I was sort of like, the middle kid, and I just ended up going to Grateful Dead concerts and smoking a lot of pot. And,
I love it.
I don't know. I just kind of like, I was one of those, let's look at this other reality here. Like I had athletic abilities. I'm not going to like, promote myself here. I got the highest score of like the row machine in the whole of high school. So they recruited.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, I had my stuff, but it was always like, I don't know, maybe that was just a lucky day and like, I need to go over here. And I didn't do well in school. I had the worst attendance, and I just ended up in libraries, learning astrology, learning all the stuff, using the I Ching, which is a divination tool. It's Chinese.
Yeah.
And I literally did it so much that I memorized the book. And so like, if you went into my bedroom, which I had to share with somebody. Like we didn't have like, we lived near DC, but like it was, my mom was a single mom. She worked really hard, but I didn't have my own bedroom anyway. But there'd be pieces of paper with all the hexagrams of what I tossed with the coins. It literally probably looked like somebody with like OCD. It's like, what are those? Oh, those are hexagrams from the I Ching. And I'm learning about nature and earth, air, fire, water, and greater wisdom. And also like how we get ourselves into a pit based on our perceptions.
Right. So was that kind of the first divination or higher level access that you formally studied then?
That helped me to process a lot of other stuff. So when I was really young, I was getting a lot of information downloaded in. I felt Eisenhower's presence. One of the big triggers was I was like 8 or 9 years old. We were in the grocery store, and Weekly World magazine, which is normally, it's like The Onion, it's kind of a joke newspaper, had Eisenhower met with aliens. And I looked at it, and I was a kid, and I was like, actually, I don't think that's a joke, right? So that sort of triggered a lot of curiosity. But because it opened up my field to so much while I was still trying to play human and go to school and just be like, yeah, let's play volleyball. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, like this is too much. I didn't have a really great time processing it all because I couldn't talk to anybody about it. But I started to delve into all that. And a lot of it was intuitive. A lot of it was confirming what I was noticing in the world about the programmings, confirming a lot that I experienced in my childhood. And it was like, okay, this is opening up another doorway. So I ended up becoming a researcher a little later in life after, you know, I recovered from all my brokenhearted, like, because I'm a Libra, like, I can't, this breakup is killing me.
Yep.
After I got through all the heartbreak of life, of, you know, not being with partners that could really, you know, because that was everything to me. Like the love story. I was like in this fairy tale, like sacred union is going to heal the planet. This is how we upgrade our DNA. I had all this other information going, but meanwhile, in my own personal world, I was like almost frantic, like sacred union and true love is going to heal the world. People who belong together need to get together, and there's all these distortions and manipulations, and people aren't getting along, and the masculine and feminine is, but I'm like, well, true love will burn through all that. And I knew that. So I was writing a lot. Like I was writing a lot and a lot about archetypes. Yeah. So after moving into the alien part of it, that was really weird. And then in 2006, I was recruited to go off planet, and I learned a lot about the shadow government through that because that was crazy. That was huge. That was major.
So that spot is something I really want to touch on because I've listened to you talk about it. Obviously, I want you to tell us the story because our audience hasn't necessarily heard that. But one of the things that always pops into my head when I hear you discuss it is, okay, what was it about you that accepted your partner's statement that you were going to go off planet? Like what made you say, oh, okay, that's a thing. He's not crazy. He's not lying to me. This is a thing that actually happens.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, throughout my life, I could tell that there was some sort of hidden influence that was trying to control me, but I'm a pretty rebellious and sovereign person. So it's like I wasn't accepting it. And it was like something was literally like it. And I noticed like plants would be put in my space or in my life. Then I started to learn about MK Ultra and these different projects and programs. And and then I started to feel like I'm in a really bad movie. Like, when are the credits going to come and like get me the hell out of this? Like, what's going on? But I give people the benefit of the doubt, like, and there'd be an authentic connection. So basically, let me just go into the March recruitment. Yep. So in 2006, I'd already birthed my twins, who are now over 21 and live with me. Well, live in the trailer and tent. Like, oh my gosh, you go on tangents very much? Yes, I do. Anyway, they were about, I don't know, 6 or 8 years old. And I had gone to a clairvoyant institute in California. And I was going to go to an herbal school instead, but there wasn't enough applicants. And I ended up, I don't know, finding it. It sort of bumped into it and ended up working a lot of energy, learning how to do readings and opening up my, you know, and they were already pretty open and, you know, just doing energy readings. I've now moved into astrology because I like having data and, you know, just in case, because I'm a human and humans fuck up.
Yeah.
So I like the data, but I still put the intuitive part in. But I was there and they were helping me to see like, wow, there's hidden weaponry on you. Like there's something that's trying to do something. And they tried to help me to clear it. And after 2 years, no, nothing.
Wow.
But they did confirm a lot of things about my childhood. They were like, you came in with this mission and you've been clearing inorganic entities from wormholes. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, oh my God. So I was like, I'm going to sign up. It's like, these people totally know. It's like, who can you tell that to?
Right.
Anyway.
Well, just to be believed finally. I mean, to have a space where you could step into and feel comfortable not being ridiculed for all of this. That's huge.
I know. I couldn't believe it. Because it was like I was living a double life in a way. But I would doubt the one that I couldn't communicate and be like, not thinking I was crazy, but I would be like, I would really like it if I was crazy, because I'd much prefer to go to a mental institution and play like board games than actually have to confront this on my path. Like, I would love to just have this be like, I am nuts, but I would definitely want to pick the menu. Like, please don't give me this crappy food.
Right.
I'll pay a little extra. But no, it was like, it kept getting validated. Like, everything was becoming true. And I knew it was. And it was only like to the outside world that I would take like, okay, you want to consider me crazy? Fine. Because there's so much work to do here on this planet. And it'd probably be easier to just be shuffled to the side. But my passion and my devotion is way stronger. So anyway, went to the Clairvoyance Institute and they weren't able to really clear it. So I just gave up. I ended up moving back home. I guess I was, 28. I don't know. My kids were 3 or 4 years old. So I was just like, I surrender. It's like, whatever this control force is, whatever this invisible thing is that is trying to get in my way, because, it was validated at the Clairvoyance Institute. I was like, just bring it to me. So the first experience was something I don't need to get into. It's just too heavy and too weird.
Gotcha.
It's much more archetypal. And so I was like, once I cleared that with him, he's like, oh, I cast a spell on blah, 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 and did all this weird shit. I'm like, okay. And then I cleared that and I'm like, cool, I'm done. Now I can get my life back. Ooh, no. Anyway, I was sort of reclusive, just taking care of my kids. I was a single mom of twins.
Which is, by the way, I want to acknowledge how huge that is. I'm a mom of 2 girls with an incredible co-parent, and it still feels overwhelming. Ever since I had kids, I feel like single moms are legit superheroes. I don't know how you do it.
Thank you. Yeah, I cried every day, and it kicked my ass. And my kids now, we're all best friends, but we went through a lot of bumps. We lost their father, and
wow.
I had to work my butt. It was unbelievable, and they were the most beautiful. I couldn't even believe I could birth these kids, right?
Is it crazy?
Like, I didn't think anything would want to grow inside of me. And then I'm like 9 feet out. It's like they were both, I was 14 feet. No, not 14 pounds. They were both over 6 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were full term, but I moved really close to the hospital. So every time like I almost had a birth, they were able to calm me down. So I was able to, and then they were holding hands when they came out and they were like golden. And then I started throwing up. I'm like, I can't believe I just birthed these children. Like, I'm just some screw up. I've taken the role of just being a screw up to everybody. And and 2 kids went in, and it was so weird. Like it changed me, because I was really disconnected from my feminine energy. It didn't mean I didn't have boyfriends, but I grounded into like the power of the feminine in a whole new way, of course.
Well, a lot of your life prior to that was pretty defensive of this, what you felt inside, and trying to reconcile with the outside. So that masculine energy seems to make a lot of sense, because it was a necessity for the circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah. I was earning a lot of male energy. So when I, got pregnant and I knew right away, I'm like, oh, I'm pregnant. But I thought I was having I didn't suspect twins. So my intuition wasn't just like, woo. But I was like, whoa, this female body actually works. Because I was so not in my body, like my whole life. I was accessing information and all this other stuff was going on, and went to that Clairvoyance Institute. So anyway, to make a long story short, which I've already made long, 2006, I moved home. Kids were probably, I think I said like 3 or 4. They might have been a little older. I was just hanging out in the basement of my mom's house, just being like, okay, this is where the energy is taking me now that I've surrendered and want to just so I faced the first part of it, like I said, and it's too long of a story. But the second part of it was there was an invite to go to this gathering in Charlottesville, Virginia. And so I decided, okay, I have not been out in a while, and I've been mostly focused on parenting, left California, left that school, left all that stuff. And I have to face whatever it is that's trying to control me. And I had that in the back of my head. It wasn't like I was always thinking about it. It's just, I was just like in my everyday, just like, okay, got to make sure there's food on the table. So I decided to go to this gathering, and this person came up to me. He had sort of a look like an agent, but yet he had a vibe of like a nature spirit. Like he had an organic energy to him.
So interesting.
Sits next to me, and we start to play the drums. And I'm just at this gathering, and I'm just like, wow, I feel so socially retarded. I haven't been out in years. I don't like using that word. I didn't mean it in that way, but
no worries.
And I'm like, wow, okay. I feel like I know this guy, right? So anyway, we end up hanging out. And to make a long story short, he was connected to this group that's connected to MJ12. And they're called the Aviary. They also have this group called the Aquarium, and they recruited him in. What I found out later is they used looking glass technologies to locate us in a past life to actually facilitate this meeting and gathering. So somehow they were able to track me. I don't know if it was through my devices or I have some like implant up my nose, and they're just like, oh, she's there and now she's here. And I won't put up my middle fingers. I'm trying to be respectful.
No, feel free.
Follow me, like whatever. It's like, what are you going to possibly do to me? But it's so weird. I'm like, I thought I was meeting him in an organic way.
Right.
I've never really felt like I'm not really an abductee, and I felt a lot of harassment, but I always felt like I could shield myself from it. So it was really weird that I later found out, it was set up to be this way. So in the beginning, to me, it was just an organic meeting and like, oh, we have an attraction. And I was living in my mom's basement in DC. And so he would come visit me and we were sort of dating, but he would go to these secret meetings all the time in DC with this group of people. And they had this huge plan to go to Mars. And they were like, well, you're coming with us. And I just thought like, if I don't want to, I don't want to. And so you guys go ahead.
Right.
I'm going to stay on Earth. I got a mission on Earth. I've been prepared for this mission since I was a kid. And the opposition and the reaction was, you're going to go anyway.
Oh.
Then they dropped it because they realized like, oh, okay, she is kind of rebellious and we can't really control her. But maybe we can control her through this guy that we know that she was connected to in a past life. Because if he goes to Mars, she'll go with him because she's in love with him. And I was. And it was very heartbreaking because like I can't just fall for just any agent. Like, you put some freaking agent on my path and I'll be like, ooh, no, I knew him.
Right.
And I saw like, he had been MyLab as a kid. His family was targeted. He had a handler.
So just to pause for a second, he was a victim of MK Ultra. Is that accurate?
But yes. And I had, this was like before, like I had seen any Project Camelot or aligned with Andrew Bashago, who was a part of Project Pegasus or Alfred Weber. So I was trying to figure this out, and they're like wanting me to go to Mars, and I'm like, all right, basically, I'm in love with this guy, but I don't really want to go to Mars. It's like, what? I have kids. We're gonna just go to the face on Mars again? It's just a red desert. I really don't want to go. I love this Earth, and I'm geared towards being on a mission.
Yeah, your mission's here.
Yes, exactly. So nobody was going to, and they realized like, we can't convince her. And I had a really lucid dream where I literally made a choice. And then I told him the next day, and he's like, oh, you shouldn't have told me that. And then really weird shit started to happen. So, but this is all over a certain course of time, because when it became obvious what was going on, they dropped it so that they could give us a chance to move in together and get married, which we did. Make
that connection even stronger and therefore harder to break.
And to kind of step back so it wasn't kind of getting in the way. And I was a vulnerable mother, so it was just like, he was,
God.
And it was like, oh, forget the whole Mars thing. But they were having background meetings I didn't know about. Then I finally had a dream after I moved to, be with him. Well, one of the first red flags was he would disappear for days, and he would answer the phone and get like some sort of code over the phone and be gone for days. And I'm like, that's sort of weird. And he'd come back. I'd be like, did you know that you were gone for 3 days? He'd be like, what? I'm like, what?
Oh,
like, he's
God.
a super intelligent guy. He speaks fluent Gaelic. He even does the Buddhist chants, and he's a great musician. Like, he's a really amazing soul. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I order all these rare earth magnets to stick on places where I think he has implants. And he wakes up, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, trying to deactivate your implants. Like, I was such a novice. I'm like, I had no idea.
I don't know. That doesn't sound like a novice. That I wouldn't know to go there. So
I researched and researched. And then I realized all the people connected to this so-called going to Mars, this wasn't just some pioneering concept that maybe will manifest. It was really connected to something that they were certain was going to happen. And I kept refusing. Then dead bodies were showing up in the back of view, and it just got really weird. And I'm like, whoa, I got to protect my kids. I was like a mama bear, mama eagle. It's just like,
oh yeah,
not dropping F-bombs. You don't F with my freaking children.
Oh, feel free to throw the F-bombs, by the way.
Don't you fuck with me or my kids. It was like a fire that came out of me that I think were shocked by, because I wasn't afraid of them. But anyway, that was 2006.
So hold on, the bodies, like you were seeing dead bodies, and like almost as a threat that you were.
Okay, so when I refused to go, it was a huge deal. And then he admitted to me, he goes, well, you don't really have a choice. I didn't just come and meet you and you get to decide whether or not you're coming. They're going to take you anyway. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, especially with the kids element. Was it ever proposed that the kids would go with you, or were you expected to leave the kids?
No, they would come with me.
God. And making that choice for 2 other humans is also huge.
Well, I was worried. I'm like, okay, I know that we're going to be facing a lot of crazy stuff on the planet. And I understand that some of these things, because a lot of it was rooted in what happened during Eisenhower's administration. They had meetings with Zetas that were basically setting up 3 alternatives, the third alternative being colonizing Mars and other planets. So I understood all that. And that's where my research, led me to.
What were the other 2 alternatives?
Oh, blasting a hole in the ozone for the pollution to escape. The second one was deep underground military bases. So it seems like all 3 have already happened.
I was just going to say, don't we have all those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. This Mars one was what I've come to learn, after Project Paperclip, and a lot of things that happened, the secret space programs got infiltrated. And so going off to Mars or going somewhere else basically was to pull in people that they could use or control for whatever abilities they have and screw over the rest of the human race who have just as great of abilities, but they have to pick and choose. So they were very threatened by, oh, she's in the Eisenhower family. And, they could tell on the timeline because they have looking glass technologies. That's how they found me and the dude to, create the scenario where the chemistry would be there to make it worth my while, or else I'd get the hell away from me, you creep. There had to be affinity because I know, I have discernment. I'm not just whatever. It all crystallized after a certain point, and I could tell that these agendas had been infiltrated. So I ended up becoming friends with Andrew Basiago, who was in Project Pegasus. He was told that they were aware of me before I was born and that we would form a great alliance. But he was in training programs with Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, and also Regina Dugan at the College of the Siskiyous in Mount Shasta. It's like, whoa, can we get a little weirder? It's like, no, it's like, seriously?
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I knew a little bit about Basiago, but I didn't know those other pieces at all.
Yes. Well, yes. And we're supposed to do an event in Hawaii, and I haven't seen him forever. He's actually healed his blindness. We helped raise money for his surgery because all the experiments that they did to him as a child actually created so much macular degeneration that he was blind.
Wow. That's incredible. I had no idea. I mean, I've read a little about, he ran for president last term and all of these things, but I didn't.
I was supposed to be vice president.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we probably disagree on this point, but I have to say I would much prefer you and Andrew to what we have right now. But,
Oh, that's cool. And I feel bad because it's like, am I supposed to say yes? I mean, I'd be like the laughing stock of the White House. It's like, I'd probably want to turn into a homeless shelter. I'd probably drink too much wine and just be like, blah, blah, blah.
Well, remember what you're saying earlier, though. You can't learn about yourself from other people.
Right. Well, whatever's meant to be is meant to be. Right now, Trump is not perfect, but he is bridging something. And then there's going to be even better leadership because he has a lot to wake up to. He's not taking care of certain things, but he's taking care of a lot. And I'm like the last person who's going to want to side with a seemingly kind of narcissistic person. But there is so much news they don't show us. And I've learned a lot. Right. But I'm not very political. So it's like, okay, give them benefit of the doubt because we're in crazy times.
Well, and that benefit of the doubt, I think, is huge. And I want to keep going with the story you're telling. But just quick aside, one of the things that I've noticed so much about you interacting with other people is you give the benefit of the doubt. Certainly there's some things you say that people might go, oh my God, that's crazy. But to me, it's really refreshing because personally, my worst nightmare is not being believed, being gaslighted, having some story to tell and not having an audience that's respectful of it. You provide that space for so many people. It's almost like whether what they're saying is truth or not, you make them feel comfortable to share it with you. They probably, in many cases, that's the first place they've had that opportunity, which I think is huge.
Wow. I really appreciate you saying that.
It's a really big deal.
You're so freaking awesome. But yeah, so I mean, it just all ended up where I just refused to go.
Yeah.
And then I learned a lot about timelines, and I'd already put a lot of attention on, Ichi government treaties, like I said, that weekly world news article, when I was a kid, and that curiosity got sparked, and I was like, whoa, I'm being recruited to do something that I'm not in agreement to. They're putting a person in my path that I actually have a deep love and attraction for, that I've known. It was a very familiar soul. So I kept trying to just tell him what was going on. And his roommate, actually, because I had to move away from him. It was getting really dangerous. And he was bleeding from his orifices.
Oh my God.
Literally, he would leave huge pools of blood in the toilet. And I'm like, dude, Yeah, because he was dealing with like bad alien. Nah, I don't want to say good, bad. I know I'm trying to be so beyond duality. But these freaking aliens or whatever he was dealing with were probing him and doing all this stuff and creating artificial telepathy and convincing him something, but he was getting sicker and sicker all the time. And I'm like, something's not right here.
Yeah.
So I investigated all the names of the people he was talking about that I was not able to interface with. And they're called the Aviary. They're connected to MJ-12. They have their hands on the alien technology, and they're trying to take people off planet, underground bases. And yes, we already blew a hole open, seems. And then they realize that she's not going to go. She's not falling for this.
Clearly, they've got a bunch of power, right? So what kept them from just saying, screw you, you're going, we're drugging you, we're throwing you on a ship, you're going?
Well, that's what my partner said. Okay, so he had like alters, right? And I was learning this stuff like, okay, MK Ultra, handlers, like he's disappearing for 3 days. He doesn't remember. And every time I try and talk to him, and this is my husband, like this is somebody, it was a Celtic hand fasting thing. It wasn't like a religious marriage, but we were like, you know, and the Mars thing kind of went away. But I realized like later, like, oh my God, you know, they're trying to mastermind the script between us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had different, you know, personalities. Every time I tried to talk to him and get to the bottom of things, he'd be like, well, if you're going to talk to me about this, we have to pull out the battery from our cell phones, our computer,
oh my God.
and shut down the electricity and do all this stuff. He said, there's webcams all around and there's black trucks and all that. Black, no, they were SUVs. Just like, okay, I'm trying to raise my kids.
Right.
So I created the Return of the Divine Feminine page, but I was about to create Return of the Pissed Off Bitch. You don't fuck with me or my kids.
Yeah.
I got really mad, you know, and I tried to help him. He was very attached to succeeding in this mission.
Yeah.
That he lost all respect for me being a sovereign being. It was like, oh, if I let these guys down, I'm no one. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Of course you are someone. Yep. But can't we just hang on Earth? And so in their eyes, it was a mixed bag because the Aviary is very similar to what we see in the disclosure community of a very mixed bag. So there were some that were absolute disinfo agents and very part of the dark part of it. And there are other ones that were trying to understand it and push it in a positive direction. But what I was picking up on was artificial telepathy, and he's not even dealing with real grays or aliens. These are what the military has created to create what looks like an alien abduction. He was channeling something that I knew was false about us having to go to Mars. And it does stem back or go back to Eisenhower's administration, Alternative 3. They put a movie out, but it was considered kind of fiction. I was like figuring all this out. And then I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. But I moved down the street. And then we got a dog, and the dog shit and piss everywhere. And I was like, I had to landscape all day, and I was not able to take care of the dog. And that was a disaster. I was like, oh, no. I guess I was like a little delusional, like, wow, I can landscape all day and make no more than $10 an hour. Yeah. And we can have this dog for my children. Because, you know, when you're a parent, you're just like, they want the puppy. And I like wanted to give them the puppy. But it's like, I'm trying to like protect us from going off planet too.
Right.
It's really weird. And eventually it ended up moving on. But a lot of the people that were connected to him, that were a part of the groups that were manipulating him, realized like, wow, she's not falling for this. We can't mind control her, but we can't even heart control her. When they realized they couldn't mind control me and I wasn't sold out by my family, we're not an Illuminati family.
Right.
They figured, you know, we can get to her if we target a former partner and put him in her path. And I'm sure they do this to a lot of people. But anyway, I got out of it. It was a lot to recover from. Lost the father of my kids along the way, but that was way before. I mean, you know,
just a lot of trauma.
Yeah, but you know, at the same time, it's like I do find a place of neutrality. Like I work with a lot of clients that have been through way more than me. But what I really learned is when they're talking about we need to exit the planet because of possible doomsday scenarios, apocalyptic scenarios, most of them are engineered, right? So that was my counterattack. It's like, you think we need to go colonize another planet, which is understandable to protect the human genome in the event that there's a catastrophe. But how many of these catastrophes are engineered?
Right.
Is what I was like calling out. It's like we got HARP, we got chemtrails, you know, all these different things. And nobody's really gotten to know the fact that these people exist. They've infiltrated like so much.
Okay, so pausing from the middle school, high school perspective, when you say they, can you give us just secret space program, exopolitics stuff? Give us like a quick schooling in who they is.
Right. Good question, right? It's just like, it's always about they.
Right.
Like, it's so weird. I would say they is the Illuminati, the Cabal, and they own something on a technological level that can actually produce events in our human culture and world that are funding both sides of a war. And to the point where we're seeing this today, that there's a group that it's not about like, oh, we should be this or we should be that, or even make a choice. There's a group that's literally bent on conquering and dividing us. A lot of it has to do with galactic history stuff, the Anunnaki, exploded planets, refugees that came to our planet. Those that, went underground have not really participated that much, but they've been able to maintain a pretty high vibe. But the hybrids, though, connected to the 13 families, have been able to control them through multi-generational trauma-based mind control.
Okay.
So these people really aren't in possession of themselves. So, we can sit there and get mad at Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and the rest of them, Bill Gates, but they're just like not even like really human. So it sounds scary. It's like these monsters that are under our bed. We don't want to go into that fear. We don't need to go into that fear, but we need to know that they exist.
Right.
Because to a certain degree, we have some of that, but we have so much more. Like,
so this is all alien based then. That is where it starts.
There's something above that too.
Okay.
I mean, it comes down to some really difficult stuff, and I don't have it all figured out, but I can point out things that might stimulate a person to be like, oh, okay, all right. Going into Gnosticism, Luciferian rebellions, the fall of Sophia, the exploded planet of Tiamat, how our DNA began to digress based on the loss of balance, based on a free will universe, based on a division between service to self, service to others, also based on ways to create trigger events. I mean, we're reliving something like, we're not really in a modern world. We're in a personal crisis that we need to get a grip on. I'm glad I went through what I did. Like, I don't feel like a victim. Like, when I stood up against them and they said, we're going to take you anyway, did they? No. Right? So when people say this timeline's collapsing and we're all screwed, it's like, yeah, I know how to say no. And actually,
if you were going to give people advice on how to say no and shut them down in the way that you did, what would you tell people to do?
Right. Well, it's like, I'm not trying to like sound like, oh, wow, woo, 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 woo.
No, but like it's a victorious experience, right?
You guys are the same kind of guys, right?
Yeah.
Connected to alien technology, wanting to create something that I refused. One can easily second guess themselves and be like, did I make the right decision? Maybe they were the good guys. Maybe we needed to go off planet. Maybe we needed to do this. But, if they really were good guys, they wouldn't have treated me the way they did. They wouldn't have just messed with my partner, had him disappear for days and not remember and use mind control and not directly talk to me, right? So I had to actually learn about them and research them. Who the fuck are these people, right? It took me about 2 weeks because they got rid of all their history, all their sordid past. They were able to get rid of the websites and everything that associated with them. They were literally able to wipe out that to present themselves as being a think tank of people that are having abduction experiences. But yet I'm getting pulled into this and I'm supposed to go off planet with my kids.
Right.
When I studied the Benowitz case, this Hall Benowitz, he kind of went mad, right? And it was in the time of William Cooper being suicided and Phil Schneider. And the Paul Benowitz case is actually connected to the Mars recruiters and also Richard Doty. I mean, like most of the names of these recruiters are very famous people, like Hal Puthoff, Richard Doty, John Alexander, who's connected to, I'll send you a link.
Yeah, please do.
So these guys are kind of heavy hitters, but they're coming from a lot of different angles. And so to answer your question, like how can people kind of know that even if something is saying this is what we're going to do and this is what's going to happen, that you can counteract it? You have to almost have a sense of humor. It's like, no, you can't violate a sovereign being's energy field. But if we don't claim that, we're like almost in fear. And it's not to say that there aren't real victims. There are real victims. I can't stand it when people say, well, you create your reality. It's like children that are pedophiled and human traffic created that. It's like, I don't think so.
Right.
So I'm kind of caught between like, yes, I have a lot of positive feelings about where we're all heading, but I'm not into that sort of, and I don't like the term because it almost ends up sounding annoying, but at least to me, not to say that, anybody else should agree, spiritual bypassing. If there's any spiritual bypassing, it's saying that like, oh, it's fear porn to talk about these things. It's like, you're talking about Black Lives Movement. I'm totally all about that. I'm all about every race. But there are innocent children that are being trafficked. And it's like,
right.
why can't we be mature enough to say we've already been triggered enough?
Well, there's just so much trauma. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to.
I just can't stand that children are being used in this way, and it drives me nuts.
And that really comes a lot, at least, I mean, my very basic level research. That's a lot of originating with MK Ultra, but continuing in other subsequent programs along the same line. And tell me how that plays in with the secret space program and whatever alien races.
The MK Ultra part is very much about the trauma-based mind control. So if you have gone through it, then you end up being trained as a handler. It's like, okay, where did this originate? I've studied this galactic history and I put together presentations, and I wouldn't say I'm the most fluent person when I try and explain it, but we started off in the Lyran system, generated from the, founder races of the cosmic trinity to experience like free will, right? Something split off and had this sort of anti-God, anti-everything. Let's see what we can do with power. We have the free will to decide what are we going to do with this treasure that we've been given of power, of ego, right? And it decided to be the biggest schmuck on earth and pull in a lot of races. But do we have to say it's Lucifer? Because then, people might think, oh, well, you have a religious issue.
Well, it's an easy term to use.
Lucifer means the light bringer. It's like, okay, fine. He's the light bringer and he was the light bringer, but he's like bringing false light. So
yeah, it's not about religion. It's just that's a term that encompasses a lot of archetypal knowledge for all of us. So it's like an easy thing to relate it to.
Yes. And when there's enough information in enough places, then it's not limited to a belief system, right? So it's seen in Galactic science. It's seen in Gnosticism. It's seen in, stories in Christianity that there was this fall. Whatever the fall is about and however the stories are interpreted might be questionable. So that's where we have to look at the information and take what resonates, allow the activation, and connect with it on our own terms, because ultimately these archetypes exist within ourselves and as a part of our capacity to rebuild our DNA. I have nothing against Lucifer, but at the same time, I would easily give a middle finger up. It's like,
right.
It's like, seriously, like, so it feels like there's a really dysfunctional thing happening with a very core group and family that is literally fragmented away from itself that needs to return to each other, because it all started off in the oneness and wholeness. And it doesn't mean that, diversity isn't appreciated, but something really happened. Luciferian rebellions, there's been many, but let's not make it all about one entity, maybe a soul group or the fallen angelics. Then we go into like the Anunnaki, the Enki, the Enlil, and different aspects of the feminine, the Inanna energy that has to go into the underworld to bring balance back by actually facing these fragmented pieces based on the fact that we've dealt with exploded planets. So if you were a part of a planetary consciousness and it exploded, and turns into the asteroid belt, it's going to create a lot of fragments. So us as humans are very fragmented, but there was a plan when we came and sank down into this lower harmonic universe that a 12-tree grid would be formed to help us to rebuild our DNA with root races and starseeds. But this other, like, sort of the refugees and the rebellious ones, or the ones that traded in their DNA because they just wanted to maintain control and they hate God for having a Christ energy and they became the jealous brother or sister. I mean, that's a part of being in a free will universe that we experience the Pandora's box, right? Envy, jealousy. I mean, it's almost a part of it. So what do we do with it, though? It's like, if we really have the freedom that we need to go into that much of a dark space, isn't the priority to address that in a responsible and mature way to help each other rise above? Because it's not about what's outside of us. We all have these archetypes: the devil, Lucifer, Sophia, the goddess, Isis. I mean, we have everything built into us.
Right.
We need to make a personal choice to redeem these wars and to create harmony between these archetypes, because our galactic history literally is, shitstorm seems like an easy thing to say. I mean, it's just like, are you fucking kidding me? And
so, I mean, part of what I'm hearing you say is just all of these levels of trauma, and, definitely don't want to get political, but thinking about the All Lives Matter movement versus the Black Lives Matter movement versus all of these different pieces. And to me, what I'm hearing is some people are at different stages in processing trauma, right? And like, for me and my own experiences, to help move forward, whether it's unity within a family or unity within a community or unity on the grand scale that you're talking about, it's almost like there's this need to mourn the trauma and to have that trauma honored and heard in order to get to that next step. Does that make any sense?
Oh, totally. I mean, the honesty and transparency is hugely important because we're born into a gaping wound. We each carry a different piece of this greater trauma of, what free will does. It's like free will says you can negate your connection with true source and your higher self and go mess around and just see what you can get away with and just create addictions, create jealousy, create competition.
Right.
That shadow's like important to look at, to be like, if we have the opportunity to experience existence on our own terms, we don't do very well.
Right.
So we need our higher self and higher connection with source. But it doesn't mean it's separate from us. It doesn't mean we need to worship it. And it is a part of our DNA.
Right.
So the problem is that over the course of thousands of years, a lot of important information was wiped out and burned and destroyed, and Holocaust and galactic wars, exploding us into this lower density so that we can say, is it worth it to us to figure it out and reclaim it? Or are we just going to be assimilated into AI and like become a robot and lose our soul matrix? So, we have to care.
Yeah.
I don't think I was answering your question though. What was your question?
I'm just thinking in terms of like, certainly it would be great if everybody was at the level where we're looking at galactic unity or universal unity. But I think, looking at humans, and people are at so many different stages in that process, right? Like in hopes, we're all working towards that. But to me, in my experience, part of getting past a trauma is somebody honoring that trauma and hearing it and allowing that trauma to be mourned so that you can move to the next thing and continue on your path to, hopefully becoming closer to unity. And so for me, when I hear the Black Lives Matter movement, my reaction is like, okay, this was a real experience. There is real prejudice. The best way that I've seen to get through that is to honor that and to hear it and then move forward beyond that. But again, that's just totally my perspective.
I do agree. Absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that are going to get triggered and come up. But the important thing is that it's not infiltrated and hijacked by something that is funding or taking advantage of this necessity to heal. It's like physical symptom. There's things in the medical industry that are taking advantage of it. Oh, okay, I'll give you this drug or pharmaceutical. Like, look at psychiatrists. They're like, if you're having a huge breakthrough, you're feeling somewhat suicidal, are they giving you any spiritual counsel? Are they helping you to get to know yourself better? No, they're saying, here's a drug to numb it and take it away.
Right.
I think all these movements are important, but we need to see, what is creating much more of a trigger event and chaos than not. So, okay. So Antifa, I think we could all agree something's not right there. Peaceful protests and reacting to George Floyd, whether it's false flag or not, is an appropriate response. We have a lot to heal.
Right.
But the thing is, so many people are holding unity consciousness in their heart. And I've noticed, like, no matter what I say, even though I have black ancestors, even though I've got a freaking afro,
right.
with my pasty white skin, I prefer to be black. I would actually prefer, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can say. And I have to prove something in order to get respect from people. It's like, I know so many people that have had a really kick-ass life. Their parents took them to the orthodontist on time. They had, all this like really great stuff. I don't feel like resentful of them. I just hope that they're not a snob, because I grew up with a bunch of snobs.
Yeah.
And I actually gravitated towards people that were considered the minority. Maybe I'm considered the minority.
Well, with your experiences, certainly, I think.
Right. But my skin color, though, is like, I'm just a white chick and, I'm related to a president. But people don't understand what kind of president this is. And that's the hard part, too. It's like, I don't want to exhaust myself trying to prove a point. I just hope people intuitively connect. I mean, there was no trust funds. He was raised on a farm with no electricity or water. And I feel like the cabal took advantage of him and used his good nature, setting up these scenarios in our history to have him act upon something.
Right.
And so when the Mars recruitment happened, I was like, you're doing the same thing you did to him. And I'm here to break that cycle. It's like, you don't mess with good intentioned people.
Right.
And at the same time, I could see why it made sense. It's like, okay, protect the human genome in the event of catastrophe. But what about sticking close to this earth? I mean, our DNA is very connected to this earth. The multidimensional cosmos is a part of our energy bodies. And, we have all the ability in the world to begin to switch these things on. And if we give up on that and we say, okay, we need to go off planet, we need to do this, and we need to answer to you, and we need to take your drugs, and we need to take your vaccination, that is the crime to me, because we have it within us to be able to reclaim our treasures.
Yeah.
And there's attempt after attempt to divert us and distract us.
Yeah.
And then turn us against each other. And that is what I live to help heal. But I also admit that I screw up, and
Well, we all do.
Well, it's better that we admit it, right? Than be
exactly.
like, oh, I'm an all-knowing.
Well, and it's really interesting. You talk a little bit about psychiatrists, which I totally get. I feel super lucky because I think I have found one of the only health experts in terms of actual psychiatry who does therapy. Like, he doesn't just say, okay, here's your prescription.
That's
I'm going to sit
then.
and talk. And the growth I've experienced through him is insane because he walks through things but it's not the norm, right? Like, the norm is, because they can make more money on it, let's write a prescription, go away, come back in 2 months when you need a renewal on the prescription, you know? And I think we need more people talking people through that, especially people with that knowledge. So I feel super lucky.
Well, and that's, you know what's super cool is that you have a voice. Like, the thing is, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's so much good that has gotten good education, people with integrity who have matched their intention and spiritual truth with what they've, happened to learn. Then you got the other ones that have learned something, but they have a total disconnect.
Right.
We're subject to possibly experiencing like both. And it's like, one could say, oh, I'm a victim, or it's karma, or
well, and that's where the discernment comes in.
I like put it in the hands of the person. You decide what it means for you. Why would I do that? Like, I can't stand people who say, oh, you use this, you're that, you're this, you're that. It's like, why don't you turn the attention on yourself and figure out who you are and let that person be? Right. So it sounds like you had a really positive experience, and that needs to be known. Yeah. And I don't want to be like this overly alternative.
No. I think it's great because that voice needs to be heard.
I really love that you mentioned that because, I did go to a rehab once because of addiction, and I had the best time. I love the counselors.
Is that awesome?
They provide us vegan food and like the best herbs. No.
Right.
But I loved everybody.
That's awesome.
And I felt like I gained so much.
Well, and if you're in that safe space, it's much easier to absorb some of those positive things. And it's just, at least talking to friends and colleagues' experience, that is pretty rare that you find somebody with that Western knowledge, but who's also open to actually talking through feelings and working through things with you.
Yeah, that's hugely important.
Yeah.
Well, my background is wilderness expedition leadership. And what I was going to do before I ended up doing this work was to take troubled teenagers and drug addicts and juveniles into the wilderness.
Like Outward Bound.
Yes, but it was not going to be as harsh.
Okay, right.
That's my educational background, actually.
That's awesome. If I'm being too nosy, tell me, but where did you go to school?
National Outdoor Leadership School, Wilderness Education Association in the Adirondack Mountains.
Oh my God, how beautiful.
Yeah, it was really cool. But it was like in the early 90s. It feels like a past life.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like way more behind the computer now.
But you reach more people that way now. That's just the reality, right? Like, rather than limiting it to one group of people that you're out in the woods with, you record an interview and it goes up and you've got 20,000 people watching it in a week, and that's a huge outreach.
Yeah, but I'm not very polished, and so I get a lot of criticism. It's like somebody wrote, she has a lot of issues, and it's like, okay, that's one out of like hundreds, and it's fine. So I have something I'm going to publish tonight, and it's not like a huge rebuttal. I mean, I've been in this field for like 10 years, so there's always sort of, if we were to create a graph, there's the high points and the low points. The low points is when I have a scheduled call, I'm not at my best, and I just want to be responsible for creating like the interview.
Right.
I feel like even if I'm not doing this perfectly, sometimes I'm not at my best, and it's just like the amount of
that's so something cool. About them, not about you, right? Like, if they're ready to jump on and get that angry, it clearly has nothing to do with you. They're looking for a venting spot. I typically believe that certainty is like the antithesis to unity, because if we're all certain about things, we can't hear other perspectives. But I'm pretty certain about this, that everybody's literally doing the best they can at any moment. If you're in an interview, you're doing the best you can with that interview. And so for people to come against you for that is just an absurd waste of energy.
Well, like, I'm one to be in self-doubt, but it's just, Libra.
Yeah.
What are you, by the way? What
I'm a Pisces.
Oh, cool. I love Pisces.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about astrology. I know very little.
Oh, well, you don't need to know astrology. You're already very embodied, and like, you've already mastered the realms. Like, some people don't need it. It's just,
Well, I think it's cool because it's another perspective. So I'd love to. I need to know more about it.
I didn't ever expect that I would do it for a living. I thought it was like a cool angle, like a great tool. But then through word of mouth, all of a sudden, it's just like I'm in demand. I'm like, what?
That's a big deal. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people that need that input.
Well, I try and use it in the best way. So I go into medical astrology to help, tune up the person instead of be like, oh, like I'm not into future telling. It's like I don't want to get in somebody's way. It's like you're a free and you're a creative being. And I'm not going to tell you how things are going to be because you're going to create that. But I will tell you things that help to empower you and also see where there might be ancestral patterns or outside programmings.
Oh, that's awesome.
That get in the way. Like, yeah, I've really devoted to something that I feel good about as far as me doing readings. What about you? How the heck did you get so awake?
Well, I don't know that I'm awake. To be honest, it's actually kind of ironic because I feel like a lot of the growth that I've been able to experience is literally, this is going to sound completely insane, but because of access to some pretty good medical perspectives. But I was actually thinking about this because listening to some of your interviews, you talk about ways that pharmaceutical companies and all of these things get in our way. I have to say, full transparency, I have a thyroid issue, so I take a thyroid medicine. I have Crohn's disease, so I get this crazy infusion every 8 weeks. But I look around me, I'm totally fine with medicine. I have crazy anxiety, so I take anti-anxiety.
Aura, it doesn't matter. I feel really bad that I said that.
No, don't, because honestly, I don't take it.
You're just a beautiful soul, and you radiate.
You're so sweet. You're so sweet.
But whatever people have to take. I mean, come on.
Well, and it's weird to me because I look around and like for my entire life, I've been more open to hearing things that other people would say are completely crazy than anybody I know. Like I grew up, my dad's an artist and we used to listen to Art Bell in the middle of the night together. And that's kind of how I like first heard about some of this stuff. And then suddenly this opportunity opens, we've been doing this podcast for like 4 years and I had crappy jobs and was able to get out of those. And it's not like I make a living doing this, but it's so important to me because it allows me to be really authentic with investigating these interests and hearing these different perspectives. I just feel crazy lucky, like somehow that medicine hasn't gotten in my way. I don't know how, but it hasn't. And I, being able to hear people like you and just experience this kind of exchange of information with somebody who is also really open. It's just very meaningful to me. So I really appreciate it.
Oh gosh, that's so cool. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't have an energy signature of somebody who is ill. I just see more of an empath that takes on so much and feels so much and is processing so much through your being.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think my adult philosophy, I would say since I turned maybe like 33, 34, I've got a couple years of this under my belt, but it's like full transparency, not ashamed of anything. My husband's always joking with me, like, you could use a little bit of shame, Kelly, just a little, maybe. Put yourself in check. But he's being very funny. But like being able to say, well, this is who I am. If you hate me because of it, there's nothing I can do about it. That's okay. Whatever.
I know. It's like, this is what I'm letting go of. It's like, I'd really love to be what everybody wants me to be. And I don't even know what everybody is because everybody's different. We're all diverse.
Right.
I'm not a polished journalist. I mean, I have a story. Most of my interviews have been actually pretty good and well received, right? I did one like 2 days ago and people were like, you interrupted that person constantly. And if I did that tonight, then... No.
If anything, the other way around.
It's just like weather. It's like you're gonna judge the clouds for coming in and creating light. It's like
right.
People just I'm not gonna say people just don't get it because everybody's different. But it was really
that's got to be really hard to take that stuff in.
Well, they didn't understand the situations behind it. It's like, I mean, people like Phil Schneider and William Cooper and all sorts of people get suicided and. The fact that like some of us can even come out with our information, I think deserves a lot more respect. I'm like literally like I'm fine with trolls. I'm fine with like positive feedback or negative feedback, but it's like seriously, you don't think that I'm gonna look at a video and play it back and realize like, wow, I'm kind of a fuck up. It's like I get it. I'm not going to do it perfect.
Well, but
like we're in a war. Can we stop like obsessing over the world of appearances? Like you need it to be like structured in a Hollywood way, but they're the ones that are feeding off the freaking children.
Yeah.
They have all this and all that and they speak their scripts perfectly, but people like me aren't doing satanic rituals. Maybe that's what they need to seem to be the influencers of society.
Right.
If we can accept the fucked upness of society and give it unconditional love, we can knock out these bloodsuckers.
Right.
God, I never said it like that.
Well, I mean, it's just got to be really hard to take in those negative opinions. It's funny because we'll get a negative review once in a while. And when we started doing this, I'd be like totally broken by it. And at this point, I'm like, okay, that person's got some baggage, whatever, and obviously easier said than done. And I get, because I have a much smaller reach than you, it's a much smaller number of trolls. But it is harmful no matter how hard we try. But look at it this way. If you're getting that much criticism, it means that many more people are listening. And who the hell knows what stories are behind those people that are criticizing? There could be all sorts of reasons that they're on there sending negative feedback. Try not to let it get to you.
I know, I'm trying.
Yeah.
So are you feeling much better, like physically?
So good. And it's crazy because I still take all of this medicine.
So wondrous. Like you're just a beautiful soul. It's like, but
you're so nice.
I'm so sorry that you've been struggling with the physical stuff.
You know what? But like, I feel like that's part of my journey, right? Like, you were talking about it a little bit. I don't feel like a victim because I feel like every hardship I encounter allows me to authentically connect with more people.
That's what an awake soul does. That's why you're so brilliant. Oh my God.
You're so
you
sweet.
Just, literally nailed it. Just right there. You freaking nailed it.
Tell me a little bit about, I guess I'd love to hear how the moon plays into astrology and some of the perspectives you have there. And also just at a baseline, like what the hell is the moon? Why is it there? How is it impacting the stuff that's going on right now?
To me, the artificial component of the moon has a lot to do with the exploded planet of Tiamat, right? If something is traumatized enough and fragmented enough, it can be literally siphoned into an artificial satellite or construct. The Saturn moon matrix has a lot to do with this, and it's projected the patriarchal agenda upon humans, which women will think it's, the men need to wake up and grow up. It's like, right. No. And the men might think, wow, we're just going to use and, we need to be seduced by the feminine. It's like, regardless of what angle it's coming from, it's screwed up. The Saturn moon matrix is like the worst programming, and it's utilizing planetary energies, right? So as an astrologer, seeing all the different octaves of planetary forces has given me a strong sense of, okay, if we're going to go into the shadow elements of it, what does it mean when we begin to move into the more positive elements? So in December and January, we had eclipses that were affecting the north and south node of Capricorn and Cancer. So when we talk about north and south node, eclipses always are on the nodal axis. But when we talk about north and south node, it's helping us to connect with a higher level. And so when people talk about 5D, it's not limited to 5D, but it's very much the fulcrum of a much wider spectrum. So the fifth or 5D would be the throat.
Okay.
Are we emanating truth, or are we spreading a virus of mind control? This particular period that we're dealing with on the planet is to help to clear that space. The Saturn moon part is the overlay projection on humanity to create a patriarchal protection. And it's always going to make somebody the victim and somebody the hero. But it doesn't realize that there's other things behind the scenes. So where does that trace from? From what I've come to understand, and the reason I say what I've come to understand is this is not necessarily 100%.
Right.
But I've seen enough common threads to feel confident in sharing it, or I wouldn't share it. I would just be like, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And I feel like I've studied something enough and I feel good about it, I want to share it. So what I've learned in the Lyran system, when we are embodying more of our 12-strand DNA, based on the fact that it's a free will universe, this polarity started to be created, and it became duality, it became a fallen system, and it started to attack the things that wanted to maintain connection, because it was like free will. Well, I mean, what kind of like child is not going to be like, wow, you're handed a squirt gun and you're just going to shoot at everybody? It's like you're given ultimate freedom. A lot of people, their default is being an asshole.
Right. Oh, it's so true.
A lot of other people like us, what our default is, we want to love, we want to connect, we want to heal. And so there are differences in us, but at the same time, we have to embrace diversity. We got to forgive these people. It's hard sometimes.
Right.
Nothing that's happening right now is that much of a shock, but it doesn't mean like it's not heartbreaking. It's like,
right.
I don't even want to talk about it. I'll start crying.
Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't.
No. it's like I bring this shit up every day.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, at least in my life, the people that I feel connected to, each one of them takes up a certain amount of emotional space in my brain, right? And so then if it's somebody like you who is at some level connecting to literally tens of thousands of people, I can only imagine how much emotional space that takes up in your brain. Like, that's just crazy.
I don't know if I connect to that many people, but...
Well, there are a lot of people that pay attention to what you're saying. I mean, there are a lot of people who listen.
A lot of mean people.
Yeah, but that's just because there are a lot of hurt people. I mean, I really believe that. A person isn't going to...
I could tell that, like, I'm like on their team.
And I think that's really true. And if people aren't picking up on that, it's not your fault. You know, remember that. Like, if they can't pick up on that, they've got their own shit that they're dealing with, you know?
Right. They don't know. So I'm going to publish a video tonight. It's just like a little 10-minute clip. And I basically said, if you have a better way to do it, get off your ass and do it your fucking self.
Exactly. Or just stop watching.
This is
like
freaking free material, right?
Right. Which is why, like, if you think about it from the 30,000 foot level, it's just so insane that somebody would take space and energy out of their day to just shit on somebody else. And you got to understand the perspective that's coming from is one of zero validity, right? Like, they've got their own shit that they're clearly working through. Like I said, my favorite phrase that my psychiatrist taught me, you cannot learn about yourself from other people. It's funny because with my daughters, that's like the thing I constantly try and infuse. Like, you can do self-reflection, you can, you know, try and get in touch with how you're feeling about the choices you're making. Don't be influenced by what other people think about the choices you're making because they have no idea what you know. For every one of those assholes who's posting something negative, I promise you there are 100 people listening to what you say. And like I said, feeling heard, feeling like there's this safe space to step into with their own experiences where they're not going to be torn apart. And a lot of people on this planet have had a lot of crazy, weird experiences that are very scary and that they've been isolated because of, which is kind of like what your experience was. And creating that space, unfortunately, you don't hear from every single one who does that, but you hear from every asshole. So you got to like sort through it.
It's so well put, man.
I'm really sorry though, because no, it
really does hurt. And you know, I have tough skin. It's like I've been in this long enough. But yeah, I do have to take a day off and just like cry my ass out.
But you have to allow yourself that flexibility with all that you're diving into. I mean, that's just reality. It almost seems to me like it's more than you necessarily validating that troll's opinion. It sounds more like you feel bad that they aren't hearing what you're saying because you feel so passionate about what you're saying, that they're instead getting caught up on the other shit. You want so badly, I mean, the authenticity from you is so clear. You really want people to understand these things and move closer to being, you know, without the disconnect between us. And if there's a troll that's spouting negative stuff at you, clearly that person hasn't heard that message. And it almost seems like that bothers you a ton, which makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It breaks my heart. And I need to be stronger. Yeah, it breaks my fucking heart. Like, I just want to cry right now. So, and
you don't need to be anything that you aren't. Just remember that. You need to be exactly what you are. Like,
you're like brilliant. You're like one of my favorite people ever. And
you're so sweet.
I love you so much, and you've been so kind to me.
You too, and like it seriously is this dream come true. I've been listening to you for so many years. It's like I get to talk to you. This is so amazing.
Well, God, I showed you like way more of my transparent self because that's how cool you are. It's like that. You're so blessed. You just in people like my world. It's like you're a hero. I mean, I love you so much. Like, yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay, for sure. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
You've been listening to an Audio Wall original, produced by Byron McCoy, theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowall.co.
So I have to tell you, we got a negative review like a year ago that somebody called me. It was funny because the English was so poor in it, but they called me the most cringiest female they had ever heard speak. At first, it just destroyed me. And then I was like, screw it. And I talked about it on the podcast. And one of our listeners actually sent me this hilarious T-shirt that has like, you know, like a Miss Montana ribbon on it that says most cringiest.